Hello, Ben Kane.
Hello, Matthew Harvey. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and hello to everybody else that's joining. I can see a few people are joining already. So welcome to everyone that's joining in. And while people are joining, I will give you an introduction to my guest tonight, Ben Kane. Here he is. He doesn't need much of an introduction to people who are into historical fiction. He's been writing for a few years now, and you can tell me exactly how long he's been writing in a minute. But his latest epics are the Lionheart series. The latest book, the third in the trilogy, King, just come out. Seems to be doing fantastically well. Your first foray into non-Roman stuff, as far as I know. But before that, Ben has got loads of different series set in the ancient world, mainly Rome. And so he's got the Clash of Empires series, which is, I think, Rome against the Greeks. The Eagles of Rome series. I'm looking at your webpage here. And the Hannibal and Rome series. And Spartacus, the Forgotten Legion trilogy, which started it all off. And quite a few sort of novellas and short stories as well into the mix. But yeah, so very, very successful. Great to have you here, Ben. And yeah, hope you're having a good day so far and that you're up for a chat.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, Matthew and I are friends, so we meet up for beers from time to time. But it's great to be on Books and Booze, and yeah, looking forward to just a good bit of chat and banter, and hopefully lots of good questions from everyone who's watching. So
Yeah.
It's really nice to be here. Thank you.
I hope so. And just on the Books and Booze thing, I am actually drinking some booze. I don't know what you're drinking. If you're drinking booze or non-booze?
No, I just have an empty cup of tea. Well, weirdly, having given up alcohol for over 2 years, I started as a test with myself. I am back drinking incredibly occasionally. Basically, I'll have a low alcohol beer if I feel like it, but the non-alcoholic ones are so nice, and I don't get any trace of a headache, because even a low alcohol beer now will give me a headache. But I mostly just don't drink by choice. But
you've weaned yourself off of the alcohol.
Yeah, that's my brother said. I haven't given up beer. I've just given up alcohol.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, well, this is what I'm drinking for anybody that's interested. And I think I've drunk this one before. It's what I found in the fridge. It's actually from Lidl. But
that's why I thought I recognized the can. Yeah, it's a good selection of ales there. Actually,
yeah, it's quite a strong 6% IPA. So I'll be falling over by the end of the meeting. But anyway, so well, without further ado, I've got a few questions for you, and let's just have a chat and shoot the breeze, or whatever they say.
Sure.
So, question that people often ask, and I usually ask the writers that I talk to, is about, and people seem to be interested in, is what's your writing routine, Ben?
I'll be honest and confess that it's quite chaotic. I suffer, like most of us, I suspect, from prevarication and distraction with electronic media, but it does still follow a pretty good routine. So I have a 1 week on, 1 week off with my kids. So the week that I don't have the kids here, I usually get up a little bit later because I don't have to do school run. It was, as someone who drives himself very hard, it was a real revelation to me once I got divorced that I could stay in bed until 8:15, have my breakfast, and be done by 9 and ready to work, and have had about an hour and a half more sleep. Instead of doing the school run, getting up at 6:45 or something. So I try my best to be at my desk by 9:30. I'm not 9 is ambitious. But if it's a sunny day, I'll be out on my bike. The main thing is I've learned, I like structure, but I've learned to be unstructured because I just spent too long over the years trying and failing to do 8 hours a day at the desk.
Yeah.
So the bottom line for me now, I don't know whether you'd identify with this. The bottom line is, as long as I get my word count done, which I try to be 1,500, it doesn't matter what time of the day I do it at.
Yeah,
So
no, absolutely. I
so
agree with
no,
that.
I don't go 9:30 every day, because if it's a sunny day, it's in lovely weather, I'll look at the weather forecast. I'll get up at 5 and I'll go out on my bike, or 6, and I'll go out on my bike for 3 hours, and then I don't get to my desk till 11. But if I get my word count done by 3:30 or 4 or 5, it doesn't matter. So the word count is actually the primary end point of the day, not the time at the desk.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely the same. And I find some days, and they're rare, they seem to be rarer the longer I write. But some days I'll hit the word count by 12 o'clock. I'll do
Yeah,
like 2,000 words at 12 o'clock
yeah,
lunchtime. I'll be like,
brilliant.
brilliant, 3 hours or whatever, 4 hours. I've done my
And
2,000
do you give
words.
yourself the day off, the afternoon off,
Well, yeah, I think
writing then?
I might do a bit of editing of it or whatever, but it takes the whole pressure off. So I'll then, even if I don't take the whole afternoon off, I might go out for a longer walk with the dog, or do something like you say, or
Yeah,
go for lunch, or just go for do
yeah.
something. And even if I pick it up for a couple of hours, maybe later on in the afternoon,
Mm.
and edit, what I tend to do if I'm ahead of schedule is then edit what I've written, so that the next day I can start fresh without having to edit
Okay.
what I wrote the day before. So, because I
Yeah.
normally start by editing what I wrote the day before, but those are the days. Normal days is when I aim for 2,000, but I'll hit, I don't know, 1,700 or something,
Mm.
and it's like hits 5 o'clock and everyone's coming home from school and work, whatever, and I finish, and then the next day I have to read through those 1,700
Mm.
words, edit them, and then start writing. So I already start like an hour or so later than I'd like, because I've edited what I
Mm.
wrote the day before. When I say edit, it's sort of a
I know what you mean. Yeah,
superficial edit.
fast.
Yeah,
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 fast read. Yeah, that's what I do as
yeah,
well. Just it gets you back into the flow. I mean,
yeah.
I would find it very hard to start writing at the beginning of a new paragraph if I hadn't read at least the last few pages of what I've written.
Yeah.
Um,
So do you write like that when you do the whole novel? So you're writing a whole novel. Do you write um, sequentially? So you start at the beginning, write chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and go through that way, or do you sort of jump about a bit, or do you write sort of the end first, or have
oh
you got any
goodness me, no,
foibles like
I'm
that?
very boring. I just write from beginning to end.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the same as me.
yeah.
So,
I
and do
The
you?
only time I've gone away from that is my first few books. So the Forgotten Legion and the Hannibal series as well. Those two I remember. They've got multiple characters, so sometimes I would write multiple chapters, just to set the storyline of one character, breaking that into chapters, and then I'd cut and splice, so
Right.
it's split up among through the book. So
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah. I
only
get
time
you.
I've ever done. I haven't done that for years because it's just been one character. So
It's funny because I wrote because I do multiple character threads in the Benicia Chronicles.
yeah.
So I've got the new series that I'm working on, the Hunlaf books. So those are in first person, so it's just one character perspective, and so those are, it's a thread. I still write them even with the multiple point of view ones. I still write them sequentially though, and sort of chronologically, and it
Mm.
actually becomes quite difficult. And because I am doing this thing of finishing a chapter in as Bearbrand, and then the next chapter as the Queen or whatever, and then the next chapter as someone else, but I keep on going in that order. But I did find it a bit of a struggle in the last couple of books, and I just listened to the audiobook of The Sun, a Western book by Philip Meyer, and
Okay.
that's 3 or 4 main characters, but they're all totally separate. They're not even living in the same time frame. So one's in like the mid 19th century, one's in the early 20th century, one's in the late 20th century. They're all from the same family, but there seems to be no real connection. I mean, there's slight, they're all sort of based around the same area and stuff, and obviously they're in the same family, but
Yeah.
he
Bear
jumps
with me a
from.
sec. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right.
Come on, Savvy. Come on, Savvy. Sorry, everybody. I'm dog sitting, and the dog was scratching at the door to come in.
That's all
Sorry.
right. They do that. They do that. Yeah. So I've got.
Yeah, that sounds quite bizarre.
It's
That
bizarre, but
that book.
I did wonder whether he'd written 3 novels effectively, or 4, however many characters there are, and then just
Yeah.
split them up and just intersperse them, because they're such different voices and so different. The storylines are so different, and I kept on expecting them to all come together in some sort of conclusion and sort of some climax, and it
Mm.
just sort of petered out. And I
Oh
was really
dear, that sounds
disappointed, because
quite. Yeah.
it won loads of prizes and it was really successful. And I was and the bit that was set in the sort of the cowboy era, the Wild West era, I really enjoyed. And I thought, oh, this is really interesting. But that character, just got old and nothing. I don't know. It was just all weird. It was really, it's just strange. I mean, it was kind of a look at America, I think, and at the evolution of the American West, and what happened to America, and then oil took over from the cattle and stuff. But it was done through the eyes of these characters. But for me, it didn't quite gel as a story. There was no real plot.
I'm
The
not.
plotting.
I'm not wanting to go onto Amazon and buy it after this talk. I have to say.
I'm sorry about that. So,
Yeah, no.
I feel bad. I feel bad for the. But he sold bazillions of copies. I'm sure he's fine.
Yeah.
But it never feels good to say anything bad about someone else's book, because I know how incredibly difficult
Yeah,
it is.
no, yeah,
And
100%.
and
I've
to
just
be honest,
broken one of my cardinal rules by
there's
even saying that. Yeah.
But there's so many things about this guy's book that I really enjoyed, and that I thought I couldn't do it as well, and I've taken on board and thought they were really great. But it just, for me, I think looking at it from a different perspective, because I think it's much more about the reader in many ways than it is about the writer, whether you enjoy something or not. I think sometimes it's just whether it's the right book for you, and some people will have, think it's the best book ever. And for me, I think I like books that are quite. I think character is paramount, but I think I like to have a strong plot as well. I like to feel that you're being led somewhere, that something's going to happen. There's maybe not a twist, but there's some sort of reason for it all, and so there's an ending. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And these books that are kind of just a snapshot of time, I don't know. They for me, they're not as compelling.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. It's everyone to their own taste, isn't it? I learned I wasn't able to really think like that back when my first few books were published. I used to take negative reviews very personally, and while I still don't like them, I don't like some books I read. I don't finish some books I read. Now, I don't go on. I make it my business. I'd never go on Amazon and leave a negative review of a book because it's my trade, and I know how horrible it is, even if that author never reads it. But when people do that, they're perfectly entitled to.
Absolutely. I mean, I do think it's sometimes they do read with almost like a vindictive sort of quality, don't they? The 1-star reviews, and you think like, well, there's no need to get personal. They're sort of saying, this writer, writes worse than my dog or something,
Yeah, things like
wow,
that.
okay, come on. They come in like, a 3-year-old could have written a better book than this, and something. Wow, okay.
Yeah, ones like that are. But the other thing, I've said this before. I don't know if I've ever said it when we've been chatting. The well-written negative reviews pretty much always have a valid point.
Absolutely, yeah.
That they've noticed something about the book that's inconsistent. I mean, it's a really flippant one, and the guy, it wasn't the 1-star wasn't because of this one thing, but I remember way back it was a 1-star or 2-star of my third book, and which involves. So I'm not giving anything away to say the murder of Caesar's at the end of the book, Julius Caesar.
Oh, no.
And the main protagonist is running in to witness it, to try and stop it. And I wanted to show off my knowledge of the building, so he notices the glass panes in the walls really high up. And this guy said, "Who would look up like 40 feet to see glass windows as he's running in to try and stop a murder?" I went, "Good point."
Yeah. So that's a good comment. But I mean, hopefully that didn't mean that he gave you a 1-star review and said it was the worst thing he'd ever read.
He just hated the book, so I can't remember why. It's fine.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you've written quite a few books now, as I went through at the beginning of the introduction. I don't know how many exactly. I didn't count.
It's 17.
17.
King is the 17th. Yeah.
Okay. Well, congratulations. Congratulations on King having just come out very recently. I know that actually I can plug for you here. I know that you're selling first edition books, aren't you? First edition hardbacks.
If anyone's wondering, that my chaos of my house. That's the bale of bubble wrap there, and the first editions are piled there. Yeah, so anyone wants one.
There you go, plug away. So if you want a copy of that, hardback first edition from Ben,
drop me a message on Facebook or something. Yeah,
brilliant. Yeah. So I was going to say, so you've written 17 books. So obviously there's a lot of, probably your style and the way you write and the way you approach writing has changed over that time, because we've sort of talked about that a little bit already, and I know mine has to some extent. But out of all, when you're writing, there's all sorts of things you need to do, which people don't often think about. You need to, you do the planning, you do your research, you then actually write a draft, then you edit, you do different formats, different types of editing. Of all of the different parts of the writing journey to create a novel, which are your favorite bits and which are the bits you like least?
My favorite bit, and I think this might be quite high on your list. My favorite bit is what I call the close. What's it called in a horse race when they're coming to the end? Is it the final straight?
The final
Yeah,
stretch. When you,
it's the final straight of a novel. So I describe it to people who aren't authors that the first bit of a book, any book, especially new series, is a bit tough. It's pushing a rock up a hill, yeah, and then you get into your flow and the characters come alive and it becomes more enjoyable. And by halfway it's great, and you open your computer in the morning and bang, you're straight into it. But the last, whatever, I don't know what the percentage is, let's say it's the last quarter, it could be the last third, but the last quarter to the last 15%, it's like being in a racing car going down a hill.
Yeah, the way I've described it is, it's like climbing. If the novel is a mountain, you're climbing up the mountain. The first half, the first bit, you're looking up, going, "This is so big. How am I going to get to the end of this mountain? It's huge." And then after you got halfway through the book, you're at the top. You got a bit of a plateau at the top. It's like, okay, get my way through this, and then you're making your way down. The last bit, it's like you've got skis and you've jumped on skis. You go, "Woohoo! I'm down. I can see the river down below."
There isn't enough time in the day to write. I mean, back in the day when I was younger and had more energy, and also I think treated it. It is a job now that I adore, but it was an obsession. So I would write till 2 or 3 in the morning. Or, I mean,
never done
the most I've ever done was when I finished Spartacus. My wife and kids weren't there, and I was pissed from about 11 o'clock in the morning. The final battle scene in Spartacus, literally pissed from about 11 o'clock in the morning. And I wrote for 15 or 18 hours, 2 days straight, and crying a lot of the time with all the awful bits, and finished the book, and thought my editor would put red sticky notes all over it, and she literally absolutely adored the end of the book and had nothing to say about it. And that was 18 or 19,000 words in 2 days.
Jesus. I've never. I mean, the most I've ever written is like 5,000 in a day.
Yeah,
and that's.
I've only done it once, mind.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. That sounds crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to maneuver myself into a situation where I don't need to do that, so that I plan. So talking about the planning and everything, I mean, do you do laborious plan in terms of, you talk about word count, so you're going to finish the draft at this day, and then more or less within a few days, whatever, then you're going to move on to such and such an edit, and then you're going to do this. Do you have that sort of plan so that you don't need to rush?
I try to, but I'm sure, like you, like anybody, life gets in the way with school stuff and holidays, trying to have time with the kids, trying to see my family, my friends, social media, so if I can crack out 30,000 words in a month, that's absolutely monstrous. I'm so pleased. But I try to keep myself to 20,000 words a month.
Okay.
Now Easter holidays, that's 2 weeks. It doesn't happen in April. Summer holidays, August, it doesn't happen in August. But the sort of rough thing is that I would hope to have my book finished by the end of August each year. And then it's like, is my editor going to be happy? Maybe it'll run into September. And I don't know about you, but I keep a note of my word count week by week in my diary. So the other day I was looking at last year's book thinking I was going to be behind, and found I was actually 10,000 words ahead of last year, even though I didn't start this book, which is about Napoleon's invasion of Russia that I'm currently writing. I didn't start it till February because of research.
Yeah.
So I basically don't have very rigid objectives, because it's impossible to keep to them. The main thing is, as long as I'm largely on my course, I know, and I'm sure you're the same, and if I need to pull out a week where I have to do 15,000 words, I'll do that by working till 11 o'clock at night, or something. I used to be able to do, I can remember 6 or 8 years ago, I would literally do 7,500 to 10,000 words every week, week after week after week after week. And I just don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's just hard work.
I have been doing that, but I'm beginning to realize that it's not sustainable. I think my brain is, I mean, I don't know, I feel like my brain is a sponge, and it's like every time you write a book, it's like you're wringing the sponge out, and the
Yeah,
book is coming out like a liquid out of your
yeah.
brain. And then I start the next book straight away or whatever, and it's like, oh, there's
No,
nothing
no,
there
no,
to wring
no.
out. I can't,
Oh,
I
nothing.
can't do
No.
it.
So I used to try to do that too,
Yeah,
and I just don't try anymore. Although the end of a book, we both said you're in your skis, I'm in a car driving down a hill or whatever. It feels very easy. It is actually very draining. And
yeah,
if you told me this when I was a vet, because the parallel I would draw is that if I have to do, spay however many bitches, fix however many, castrate dogs, cats, do, clip nails or whatever, I can do them till the cows come home hundreds and hundreds of times, and I'll always do the same job. But it's not like that with a book.
no,
It just can't, it just isn't. And at the end of a book, I am brain dead, and I just let myself have usually at least 2 weeks where I don't I mean, I do my emails and my social media, but I don't attempt to do any writing at all, because I tried 2 or 3 times, and what I couldn't write, or B, it was complete shit. So the brain has to recharge. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well, we were talking just before we came on air, as it were. Oh, talking of on air, I just need to do something. I don't know if you can see. Oh, my on air sign is off. Somebody's going to complain, but you can't see it because of the way this is cropped, so that's okay. I got a glowing sign at the back saying on air, but you can't see it the way the screen is cropped. But the other day, I got told off the other day for not having it plugged in. But
Right.
luckily, you can't see it. Yeah, but before we came on, we were talking about that and just saying how I finished a book back in whenever it was, just around sort of Easter time, and how I've sort of struggled to move on into the next one, and I sort of trying to work out, what to do next, because trying to recharge the batteries and move on. It's so we're getting some questions popping up. I was going to
I
ask you some
know,
more questions, but
and
I
Mark,
can I
there's
can
one from
I can
someone that needs
hi
to put a 2-year-old to bed. So
yeah, I can highlight them. Let's have a look here. So look, if I highlight them, you get them on screen here. We can see this. So
oh,
Mark's another writer. He writes published by Head of Zeus as well.
oh, hi Mark, nice to meet you.
He's his first, I think it's his first book. I'm not sure, but the first book I'd heard of was Argo, and it's about Jason and the Argonauts.
Oh
And his
yeah,
new
yeah,
book's
yeah.
coming out called called Jason, and it's coming out soon this summer. So how easy was it? And then what's the second part of the
Switching
question?
from dark ages to another
Here we go.
period. Yeah.
Jumping eras. Okay, how do you consider switching from dark age to another period? Okay, so for you then, first, Ben, how easy was it jumping eras 1,000 years apart?
The main barrier was psychological. So I've wanted to do it forever. I only got stuck doing Roman books because they did well. I'd always wanted to write. I mean, my first book was supposed to be Viking, but then I got put off by the first Uhtred novel and thought I can't do that because Bernard Cornwell's doing it. So
You and me both,
um,
mate.
yeah, yeah. So I ended up doing sort of 15 Roman novels, but my new publisher, newish, 5 books now, they wanted me. They insisted I wrote a non-Roman book. So when it came to it, 15, 13, 14 books in, it was properly scary, because I'm not. I know so much about Rome from 15 books that I could write a lot of Roman books without having to do hardly any research at all. Whereas this, I knew a lot about the medieval period, but not nearly the same quantity. So it was with a wing and a prayer, having spent 3 months researching and not being really able to give myself any more time. I just started writing the Lionheart book, and I always have an academic on board now. So there's a professor of
Okay.
medieval history in my alma mater, University College Dublin, who was good enough to read the 3 books before they went to print and so on. And he found errors, but thankfully not very many.
That's really interesting. I mean, I feel really similar to you, actually. Sort of to carry on answering really the second part of this from Mark. That so I have considered switching from the Dark Ages to another period, and at the moment I've just finished the first draft of a novella set in the 1850s. So I have done that, and because I'm not really sure if this novella is ever going to see the light of day. I kind of started it thinking I was going to maybe self-publish it. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I think maybe it's just an initial foray into the period to sort of just to get rid of that fear, I think, of starting another period. So it's helped me to sort of realize where my gaps are, and I've started to research things. But very much like you, I read a few. Obviously I read quite a bit before, and I know I knew something about the period, probably more than someone who's never read anything about it, but I'm not an expert at all. And so as you start writing, you suddenly realize, I don't know the first thing. You don't know loads of things that, like you'd say about Rome, you just know straight away what type of weapon they would be using or what they did to, I don't know, whatever thing it is about their daily life.
But
you
it's
just
always
know
small things that become.
It's the small
well,
things.
how did
Yeah.
they do this? Like,
Yeah.
how did you use? Was there public transport in France in the early
What
1800s?
underwear? What underwear did
Yeah,
they use?
yeah.
I got a scene in this novella. There's a scene about the main character goes to a brothel, and I'm like, I don't know what underwear they wore. I don't know what underwear the women wore. I was googling, 19th century women's underwear and stuff. And
Oh yeah.
oh yeah, that's my excuse. I'm getting in now live, so you all know that's why I'm looking at these photos. But no, it's really it's interesting. So I hope to potentially write a novel set in a different in maybe the 19th century, but we'll see how it goes. But back to you, Ben. So you've done the 3 books set in the medieval period, and you've said there was difficulties in terms of not knowing that much of the history and having to sort of do more in-depth research. You've got this academic on board. I know you've at the moment you're writing a book you mentioned earlier in passing, set in 1812. Is that right?
Yeah.
So another jump.
Another jump, and no surprise. Like when you do something new for the first time, and then you go to do something else, it was easier. It was much easier getting my head into the 19th century. I've been helped by the wealth, the absolute. I mean, Dark Ages. There's pretty much nothing, no documents.
Well, it's great for me. I can just make it up.
Yeah, but it's frustrating too.
Yeah.
So I'm now totally the opposite with Napoleonic. You're talking hundreds of first-hand accounts, not just like one or two, and down to every single detail. I mean, what I'll say to you, people, hopefully some of you will read 1812, but basically the only things that are made up in it are the things the character does. Everything else, down to even what Napoleon said, and every single practically cannon shot and humorous remark, or the food that they're scavenging in Russia, and the incidents when Moscow was burning, it's all accurate. And so I'm constantly having to go, no, I can't put that in. I can't put that in. I want to put that. I can't. There just isn't room. So
well, yeah, it's an interesting problem to have.
Yeah, but I definitely now got the confidence to go. Next year I'm going to write a Viking novel. So I'm not going to write a Roman novel for another couple of years. Yeah.
So everybody wants to join the Dark Ages now. Everyone's jumping on board.
Yeah, it's going to be set in Ireland though, so not in England.
Okay, I'm gonna write a Roman novel soon. So
absolutely, yeah.
Actually, I'm in the upcoming Bearbrand books. They are actually going to go to Rome, but it's going to be in the 7th century, so it's a bit later. But yeah, I might have to ask you some questions at some point about post Imperial Rome. Another question here. It's a big one, so I'm going to highlight this. I don't even know if we can see it all. Question for you both: is field research essential for your novels? With Google Maps and countless images available online, can you get away with not visiting the setting of your stories? And then I think some detail about when going to Jerusalem, but I can't. I'll pull it back and I can read it out because I don't think you can see it all because it's too long. The comment. Went to Jerusalem to get a feel for the setting of my own work set in the 1st century AD, and was greatly distracted by the modern infrastructure until the only thing I really got a feel of was just the local climate. So I can answer first very quickly. I would love to visit most of the places or all of the places that I write about in my books, but I can tell you it's become a running joke and a point of great annoyance to me sometimes that I almost never get to visit the places, and if I do, it's almost always after I've published the book that where they're set. So it's become a bit of a running joke with my wife that I'll write a book and then like 6 months later we'll visit the place and I'll be like, whew, thank goodness, it's in the that's the right place and that's there. So I do use Google, YouTube and Google Earth and Google Maps and everything as much as I possibly can, and old maps and a lot of imagination and a certain amount of writing vaguely when needed as well. I think you can get away with people paint a picture for themselves, so you can pull in. I find that I can write a scene with broad brushstrokes, and I'm sure people fill it in, and for them it looks like, you know, the Colosseum from Gladiator, the movie, or something, you know. And I've just sort of said there's big walls and some, you know, people, and so you can you don't have to know every single minute detail of everything to give a really authentic picture, I think, as long as you can kind of extrapolate from your own experiences of life and where you've been and similar things, and use your imagination. But I know that you've done a lot of research trips, Ben, so what's your take on it?
Yeah, well, a lot of research trips equals, do you want to fly to Italy in October when it's cold and miserable here and drive around the south in the sunshine drinking Italian wine and visiting ruins that you would visit when you're on holiday anyway? Oh, go on then. But so I've done I've been to a lot of the places in a lot of my novels. Having a little bit of history revisited in that when I wanted to visit Carrhae, which is the main battle in my first trilogy where Crassus lost 7 legions in one day to the Parthians, and it's on the border between Turkey and Iran. And at the time I was writing it, it wasn't a very safe area of the world to be in because of the PKK, the Kurdish rebels.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, not funnily, it's awful, but I wanted to go to Borodino, which was the big battle 80 miles west of Moscow, where Napoleon fought the Russians for the first time. And I also wanted to go to the river Berezino, which is the most dramatic scene in the retreat, where you had a bridge that was going to be blown in the morning and civilians and closing in Russians using cannon, and the most horrific scenes. And I mean, just beyond 10,000 civilians at least died, never mind the soldiers, and quite extraordinary heroism. And it's right beside the border with Belarus.
Yeah.
So I have a friend who's just done a long walk. He's a crazy guy who goes off walking from, you know, the North Pole down into Siberia and stuff like that. And he's cycled all around the world, and he's just come back from Siberia. So he was doing, you know, literally walking through the wilderness in Siberia, and he finished his walk, which was, I think, 5 weeks or something, and was promptly detained for 4 weeks.
Wow.
And accused of being a British spy, and like in Siberia. So I sent him a message. I went, so it wouldn't be a good idea for me to go to Borodino, and he said, maybe not, especially
maybe not.
battlefield you're going to, you know. He wasn't doing anything military. He was just walking. So.
Yeah, you'll be going around asking questions about. So where do they put the cannons? Like, right.
Yeah. Did you say missiles?
Yeah. What's the range of the cannon that we're using? You're stepping out, marking out distances and stuff. Yeah.
And funnily enough, the Russians and the Germans fought a battle there in 1941 as well, the exact same place.
Oh wow.
So this is a great book. I mean, I don't know how useful it's going to be, but it's really fascinating. But to get back to your question, Google Earth is my friend too, and you know, a good writer. I don't know if anyone's heard of The Tenderness of Wolves by Steph Penny. It's about 12 or 15 years ago. It's set in Canada of the 1880s. You know, don't know, that's maybe not quite your time period that you're looking at, but it's essentially about a tiny rural community that is primarily Scottish immigrants, and there's a death, and it's a magnificent book. I mean, I think it might have been listed for the Booker or something. Fantastic. And she's got fear of flying, Steph Penny, so she never went to Canada because she couldn't get on a plane, and she got absolutely slated by some reviewers because she hadn't been to Canada, to the tundra and the forests. But you wouldn't know that reading the book. I mean, it is the most extraordinary description of the winter there. I thought it was incredible.
I've just noted it down. I'll have a look. I'll check it out. It sounds really good.
So because sorry.
I'm thinking I just think I might end up setting a book further north. I've written this novella in Texas, but I might write sort of based in Montana or something. So actually, it'd be much closer if it's, you know, wintertime. It would be, you know, some similarities with Canada. But you made me remember something that I've talked about in a previous chat. I've had one of these before, and I can't remember who it was with, who I talked about it with. But I know that you're a big fan of Rosemary Sutcliffe, and I met Rosemary Sutcliffe.
Oh, did you?
I met her when I was doing my A-level English, and she was friends with our English teacher, and I was a terrible student, and I failed A-level English. But we went to her house and we met her. It was about 2 or 3 years before she died. And
I am so jealous of you right now.
Well, but the thing is, So I'm jealous of myself because I didn't pay attention. It's like one of those things I look back and I think,
Mm.
what? So
You
anyway,
didn't value the experience for
I
what it
didn't value
was.
the experience at all. I was probably like, bored and wanted to go to the pub or something and
Oh,
thinking about, girls. Or I just wasn't, I was 18
wow.
or 17 or whatever. But I remember just that she was very friendly and and giving with her time, talk to us and everything. But she was in a wheelchair. She was
Mhm.
wheelchair bound and very, very
For her whole life,
severely
like,
disabled since she
yeah,
was a teenager.
yeah.
And obviously later I read more about her life, and she wrote all these extraordinary
Yeah.
books about all manner of places. And she traveled as a child. She Before she was disabled, they were in Malta, and they did a bit of traveling. But most of her life, like 60 years of her life or whatever, she was wheelchair bound and really couldn't travel. And she wrote about big burly Viking warriors and
Mhm.
King Arthur and all these Roman legions,
And
and she was a tiny little
not just her
woman.
descriptions of place and sense of history,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you've read Sword at Sunset, which you mentioned. I mean, that's her
Mm,
Arthurian novel. It's
mm,
regarded by many to be the finest Arthurian novel ever written. And
yeah.
I hadn't. It's an adult's book, not a YA
Yeah.
like a lot
Yeah.
of them. And I hadn't read it until a couple of years ago. And it's extraordinary, and the depictions of human relationships within it. And she never married and didn't have kids.
No, no.
You
It's
know, there are some people who don't need to do the things and be in the places. They can just write about it.
Well,
So
whenever anyone
hopefully
says
we
to
do
me,
that with
yeah, well,
with
whenever
our,
anyone says, that, oh, well, have you visited this, or do you need to
yeah,
visit there? And it sounds like the question actually that
from
he came to the
Jason.
same conclusion that you didn't
Yeah.
need to, but it wasn't that useful for him as well. But who was it? I'm trying to
So I
trying to
get
remember the name now. Jason.
Jason.
Yeah,
I get a feel of the place. That's the thing I
you
get,
do.
Jason. I do feel in my head I know the place better if I've been to it. But when I
Yeah, yeah.
can't go there, I just get on with it. But I do
There are certain
prefer to go there if
things.
I can.
If you're there are certain things. I remember a good few years ago, and I went up to Northumberland and just walking along the coast for an hour or something, and there were just things that I just jotted down in a notebook. The sound of the surf, the
Mm,
sort of the way things smelt, or whatever little
mm,
details that happened. And
mm.
later on, you can incorporate them and put them into the place. But if you're not there, in my case, if I'm not in Northumberland or in Scotland or Ireland or Spain or wherever I'm writing about, I just extrapolate places that I have been, or different times, different places, and just
Yeah,
put that into
exactly.
the.
Yeah.
So I've talked about this before as well. I often sort of think about some of the more, there's lots of poverty in the times that we're writing about. We're writing about far back into the past. The world was a lot simpler place, but it was also a lot more impoverished. People didn't have mod cons and stuff. And so I think back to visits I've made to places like India, where you see lots of poverty on the streets, and I think, well, a big city in early medieval period is going to be have similarities to some of the
Oh my
things you'd
goodness.
see in the
Yes.
streets
Oh yeah.
in India or something like that. So you can kind of extrapolate the modern day experience to
And
to to the, to the past.
it's, I think maybe it's worth commenting here that one of the things, and again, I'm sure you feel you'll know what I mean or do the same, feel the same, is that you've got to try and strip away as much of your modern sensibility as possible, because the kind of poverty in India, it's truly shocking if you go
Yeah,
there. And
yeah,
readers get really shocked by what we write. And we've had this conversation off camera about what you can get away with nowadays. It's changing.
yeah.
But
And
people weren't, they were like us. They the Romans love their dogs. There are tombstones to Roman dogs with
yeah,
really sweet
and they
words
love
on
their
them.
kids and they love their
But they
wives,
loved
and
kids, but they were
yeah,
homophobic and racist and
yeah,
misogynistic and
yeah,
crucified people and butchered whole cities. So
yeah. Well, I
uh,
mean, the thing is, I mean, sure, even Hitler loved his dogs. I'm sure, I mean, the
yeah,
most evil person in the world is still nice to his family and his dogs potentially. So
eventually, yeah,
it's difficult to know how to write
yeah.
about the past.
So in some stage, in some ways, we have an impossible task, because Harry Sidebottom, who a lot of you probably know, he's a great Roman author, a friend of mine. He's actually a Roman academic, and I always quote him. He said, if you painted a Roman, for example, as accurately as we know they were, like I just described, no one would read the novels, because he'd be pretty unattractive main
It,
character. So
it's a
we're
really
compromising history just by doing that,
Yeah, well,
which I
it's
don't
whether
like.
Well, I think this is something that happens a lot in modern historical fiction. Is that and maybe I might fall into that. I'm going to say it's a trap. It's not a trap. I think it's just a thing of the times that you're writing in.
Mm,
That that your main character or one of your main characters perhaps looks at the world, and you often get like the outsider. They look at the
mhm,
world in a slightly different way, or maybe they're a bit ahead of their time, or they're a rebel against the mores of society or whatever. So you can have the slave owning Romans and being horrible to people and homophobic and all that as, but if they're not the main character, people will be okay with that. It's difficult when it's the main character. It's very difficult then to sort of get
mm,
people to buy into it and say, okay, I want to follow this guy as the protagonist who's actually a real
yeah,
scumbag by modern sensibilities. So if you give your
mm,
main character some sort of saving grace to make him a bit more
mm,
palatable, but it's a really difficult thing because then you feel like you're compromising the truth
yeah.
of the time.
And I'll be interested to see. I was thinking this literally the other day. I was writing the Battle of Borodino, which was extraordinary carnage. It was a quarter of a million men within cannon range of each other for 12 hours. And you can just picture the carnage using all kinds of grape shot and solid rounds and
Jeez.
explosive. And what the main protagonist is witnessing as he's a messenger moving around. I actually had him seeing things and not commenting on them. So truly horrific things. And I just think, because I thought in the moment he wouldn't actually really be going, "Oh my God, that's awful, that's so
No, it would
terrible."
just be
Literally, all he thinks he's going to be blown apart with every
yeah, people
second that
exploding
passes.
and him just getting
So
covered in
yeah. So
showers of blood
well,
and
for
guts and stuff.
one I
Yeah.
used, I mean, I'm going to make an apology to the French soldiers whose stories I will have taken parts of because I can't use them all in the book. There aren't enough characters in the book to have them. But what happened to him there is what happened to a French officer whose account I've read. He was a cannonball hit his horse in the belly,
Ouch.
and he was thrown up into the air, like a doll, and landed on the ground and sort of looked at his arms and his feet and went, "I'm fine." Not a scratch. And he got up, and his belly had been blown apart, and it was disemboweled and
Ugh.
still alive on the ground beside him, and he wasn't even touched. And I'm going, "Oh my God!"
But that, but
Yeah,
it just shows the incredible randomness of war and
yeah,
how it's just one person survives, the next
yeah.
dies. Because
I was, yeah,
the horse is blown to bits, but there'll also be another guy that's hit the cannonball
yeah,
that's gone through the horse and taken out another couple of guys further down the
yeah.
field. So
There was
it's just
one cannonball
horrendous.
at Smolensk, which was a sort of smallish battle before Borodino, where one cannonball took out a whole line of French infantry, 24 men.
Yeah,
Every
yeah.
single one of them
If you
killed.
get the right, or
The
the
right
wrong
angle.
angle,
It's
but
all about
the
the
wrong
angle.
angle or the right angle, but if you get, you get
I don't know
through.
why
I
I'm
mean,
laughing. It's just
it's not. It's
no.
terrible. I mean, it's almost
But I think
you
you
can't
get
get your
this
head around it.
gallows humor. Um,
You almost can't get your head around it. The other day,
no.
somebody was mentioning to me, somebody brought up that where I was walking along and somebody said, "Oh, I saw a friend of mine was walking along and he said, "Oh, I was in that pub when the 9/11 atrocities
Yeah,
happened, the
yeah.
Twin Towers." And he said, "I saw it live on TV. We all went in there and we were watching it on the TV." And I remembered where I was. Obviously, I
Mm,
guess everybody that remembers where they were when
mm,
that happened, and you saw that live on TV potentially. And I did. I was at work, and I said, I remember when the second tower got struck by a plane. It was so unreal. I remember somebody in the room with like nervous laughter, like
mm,
because it was like you can't
mm,
take in what you're seeing.
mm, mm.
It's just like obviously they're not laughing, thinking this is a funny thing.
No, no,
It's
no.
just like oh my god, I don't know. It's just
Well, I was out
it's
in the
difficult to
field.
know how humans respond to things.
Yeah. Well, nervous laughter is a thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
And I was
yeah,
talking with an ex-serviceman the other day, and ex-policeman actually, and who'd seen some horrible just bombs and things like that, and they, and fire crews, they do develop. It's a
yeah,
protection mechanism.
yeah.
It's a normal thing. They're not laughing because they think it's funny. They're laughing because it's a coping mechanism. Um, yeah,
Right. Changing the subject away from this doom and gloom, but I mean,
yeah.
we do write about lots of war and
There's
bloody battles
loads
and
of
stuff. So
humor. I've never worked so hard to put humor into a book as I have with 1812 because I'm very aware that the relentless awfulness of it might put people off.
I'm gonna say I need to get an early copy of this. This sounds good. So make sure I get an arc of this one because this
Sure.
sounds good.
Yeah.
This sounds like a. I want to read something different from you and see what this is like. But there's a question here on that note about books and which we've written. So, question for us both: which is your favourite book that you've written? I know that's like choosing a child, but Ben, how would you answer that question?
I'm going to give you two answers, Rachel. One is the flippant one, which is the one that I've just written and just been published because I want to sell copies of it, and it's also the one that's in my head. But possibly Eagles at War, which is about the 3 legions that were wiped out in Germany in '89. And I wrote it when I was in my middle to late 40s, and the main character is a guy in his middle to late 40s. And I remember reading Legend, and I know Matthew's a big fan of David Gemmell, so I read Legend when I was 14. And as a 14-year-old, I didn't understand, but I still remember 40 years later, I didn't understand, or nearly 40 years, why there was this guy in his 40s whose muscles were all stiff in the morning and he had to oil himself up to get limbered up to be able to fight because everything hurt. And then I got to my middle 40s and realized David Gemmell must have been that age. So
he was younger, I think. I think he was younger when he wrote it, but he just thought ahead and worked out what it was going to be like. But
so
it was David novel. Yeah.
So I wanted to portray a man who was in the waning powers of his strength, but with the commanding ability and the love for his men that would do anything to get his men through, as many of his men through, no matter what. And I poured everything into that. And I get a lot of love in the emails and social media about Tullis. So I think I succeeded. And anytime I ever flick back through it to get a stimulus for a scene or something, I think, oh yeah, I like Tullis. He's a good guy. So
that's really interesting because I was going to say it's really difficult to pick a book. And I think I could probably pick... I'd have to say the first one, The Serpent's Sword, because it's the book that started the whole of the Benicia Chronicles series, and so it's kind of like it created, my career, I guess, to some extent. But really, I think the book that I enjoyed most writing and that was easiest to write, in some ways, is my own homage to Legend by by David Gemmell, and that's Wolf of Wessex. So again, it's a guy probably around 50 years old.
The loner living in the woods, isn't it?
The lone axeman living in the woods who's old and aching. And the negative reviews I get are, oh, why is this guy, complaining about his knackered knee all the time and his bad shoulder and whatever, and it's because he's my age.
Yeah.
And I just thought of him as like he's been a warrior since he was 20 or 15 or whatever that he started, professional warrior, an elite sportsman. And I just thought this is like a professional rugby player who then is living as a hermit, at the age of 48 or 50 or something, and who gets called upon to go back and play elite sports again. And he's just, that's just what it. In my mind, that's just what it is. This professional guy, professional soldier who would be like a professional athlete at one point in his life, and he's obviously fit, but you can never be 20 again, and so he's in pain and he's running around. And in this, it's basically like True Grit, set in the 9th century. So he's got a young girl that he's having to look after, and he's running through the forest and killing the bad guys and doing his thing, stepping up.
Yeah,
as you have to do. And so it's basically a western with axes. And he's got an axe that's called Diathengenger, which means Death Walker in Old English.
Nice. Yeah.
So he's very much a nod to Druss and Legend. Okay, more questions coming in. Okay, Tony, if you had a chance to go back in time, monitor life as it was for real without altering history, when and why would it be?
That's really difficult.
So I'm gonna say first. I can think of something straight away, just because. So if it's like a unique time and place, and you can like pinpoint, where you are, I'd say the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and the few days afterwards to see if he really resurrected.
So, not being controversial there or anything.
Hey,
that's a really good one.
He's a historical character, right? He's a historical figure. He existed in some form or other.
Yeah. Okay.
Whatever. So let's not get too into the religious side of things. But yeah, to the site of the resurrection, see what happened.
That's very profound, because I was just going to say, I used to say I'd like to see the Battle of Cannae, but I wouldn't really, because it would just be too distressing. It was Hannibal's greatest victory, one of the most extraordinary use of tactics pre walkie-talkies and radios, and still taught today in military colleges. I think I'd say first century AD Rome. I'd love to take like a drone flight over that and just be able to see it in its extraordinary splendor.
Yeah, I would. I think seeing things, but like you say, that big battles, though, you wouldn't want to see that, because that would just be horrendous. It would scar you for life.
The drone. I'd love a drone shot of Cannae to see the horns of the bull, to see it actually happening, like in speed. When they do it in time lapse. So maybe so I didn't have to see a close up of what they're actually doing to each other. But yeah.
Good question. Difficult one. I mean, it get asked a lot. If you could live in the time you write about, would you? No way.
No,
not interested.
I'd be dead probably in about a week.
I know that I would definitely be dead, because I had appendicitis a few years ago, so I would have died then. So even if I hadn't been killed by someone as a teenager and a young man, I was quite lippy, and I would have been stabbed to death in the mead hall long ago. I'm sure. So have you read The Long Ships by Franz G.
Bengston? I'm very aware of it. In fact, I might even have a copy, but I haven't read it. And now that I'm going to be writing Vikings, I probably won't read it.
I have a copy, and I read some of it. I read about a third of it before writing A Night of Flames, which is my second Viking book. And I may go back and read some more of it, because it travels around a lot, so it goes to different places. So it might be interesting just to see how he tackles the trip down further south into Spain and the Arab world, which is where my book is, with the third book in the series, is heading. So I might. It's interesting. It's a different style. It's written like 70 years ago or something. So
yeah. I think it was made into a film, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I think the film is it the Long Ships, or is it the Vikings? No, it's the Long Ships, isn't it? It's actually
So Adrian, if you haven't read Robert Lowe's Oath Sworn Viking books, there are only 5 of them. They're absolutely fantastic. He sadly died last year, but they're the best Viking books I think I've ever read.
So I only met Robert Lowe once. I know you've met him several times. I only met him once, and it was that meal that you couldn't make. And
that I organised and couldn't make.
You organised, and then he was there. He travelled all the way to see you, and I had to break the news that you weren't there. And he said, "Well, I'm not going to repeat what he said about you."
He was brilliant. He was such a raconteur. He was a journalist back in the day, and he was in Vietnam. Yeah,
he was amazing.
Freely admitted he took heroin in Vietnam. He says, "You're in Vietnam in 1968 with the war going on. Why aren't you going to try and take heroin?" Okay. But his best story, 2 of them, but one of them was that he was standing in a taxi. This is an homage, because he was such a great character, larger than life. He was standing in a taxi queue late at night with his wife. Let's say 20 years ago, they'd been to the theater or the cinema or something. And as can happen anywhere, but it was Glasgow, this guy walked up to him, this kind of rough looking guy, and said, "Give us £1 or I'll stab you." And Rob, although he was a Viking reenactor, didn't have his mail and his axe with him. So he took out his wallet and gave the guy a £20 note, thinking that was the wisest thing to do. So the guy disappeared, and they were still queuing for the taxi. 10 minutes later, the guy walked back and goes, "Here you go," and gave him back £19.
Brilliant.
Nothing to do with historical fiction. Sorry, everyone.
That's good. Well, yeah. So the last time I saw him was the end of that meal. He left, and I remember that he kissed me on the cheek, which was unusual because I'd never met the guy before. So
he was one of a kind. Yeah,
larger than life, but lovely guy, very warm guy. So more questions here. And Justin Hill, by the way, is on. Great Viking author.
Indeed, yeah.
And said that he's just read Waylander by David Gemmell to his son, and it is brilliant, and it is.
Yeah, it is.
So, Ben, have you ever thought of writing a book set in Irish history? It sounds like you're going to soon.
Yeah, hi, Jonathan. I know you had another question about getting into writing, I think, but to answer this one, Yes, indeed, constantly, always, and I've never gone there because 75% of my readers are British, and no disrespect, they're not necessarily especially interested in Irish history the way I am, being Irish. So I haven't. Basically, my book each year needs to sell enough for me to live on, and so I have an eye to what's practical and what will succeed. But next year, my publishers, I mean, Vikings, it doesn't matter really whether they're Vikings in Ireland or Vikings in England or Norway, they're still Vikings, aren't they? And they have a much richer history. Well, indeed, the Romans have no history in Ireland. So, they have a big influence on Irish history. So that's what I'm going to do. I've also talked to my publishers about other series set in Ireland, and they're interested. I mean, they're invested in me, I hope, for the rest of my career. I want to write a trilogy set at the time of the Irish War of Independence,
Okay.
right through into the Civil War, because I have, some of you may not know, I often write my books from two points of view. So Romans, Carthaginians, slaves, and Romans, because no one was good and no one was bad, or all good and all bad. And like a lot of people in Ireland, I have members of my family who were in the British Army actively serving in World War One or in Ireland, and I have members who were fighting for Irish freedom. And so, um, it'd be an incredible thrill to I could populate quite a lot of the book with members of my own family because my brother's done so much research on it. Yeah. So, what about you? Have you any? I know because your wife's Spanish. Have you any dreams of setting? Well, you mentioned your Viking novel in Spain.
Well, yeah, I think they're going to visit, Seville and Cordoba and places like that in the next book, possibly. I mean, once I start writing it, who knows? Because Night of Flames, I thought was going to be 100,000 words, and it ended up being 160,000 words and going places I hadn't anticipated. So that's the plan at the moment. I don't plot that far ahead, so I've kind of got a very vague idea. But I bought some books off you recently about the
Oh yeah,
the
you did.
Muslims and the Moors, so you can see why now.
Yeah,
So
for charity, everybody. He
a
wasn't. I wasn't
charity,
being
that's
really
true.
mean and saying no, you
Yeah,
can't
it's
have these books. I'm raising money for charity. So
terrible. Every now and again, he comes knocking on the door. Can you buy some books? help a poor author. No, I don't know where they are, but yeah, I've got them somewhere in my pile of books. But yeah, they were for charity. So I've got to ask you actually a question now, live on air. Are you the person that edited the book? There's a book about the Byzantine Empire,
Hmm.
and someone's crossed out Byzantine in loads of places
No,
and
no,
changed it for
no.
Roman.
Oh my goodness, no. So, the books I'm auctioning on Facebook at the moment, hundreds of them, everyone for Park in the Past, a Roman fort project near Chester, which is amazing. They were donated to hundreds of them were donated to the park by a retiring reenactor.
Okay.
So
It's,
they're his books. So yeah, no,
so
I didn't even know they'd been
so
annotated.
no, so it's hilarious. So whoever this person is, he's Tipexed out
Oh my
Byzantine and then written Roman or
God,
something.
sorry.
And but the thing is, I was thinking, so this is a whole level of sort of anal,
Mm.
because you think, well,
That
okay,
that
even if you disagree with the fact that it's called
yeah.
Byzantine, and you think, surely you don't go through the whole
Oh
book
no.
Tipexing out.
As pedantic as I am, Matthew,
Wow.
that's a different level to what I
Yeah,
might
well,
do.
I mean, I did wonder. I thought, well, maybe he's got issue with the thing. But I thought, because to start with, it was just in one bit, and then I kept, and I was like, wow, this is throughout the
And I
whole
hadn't
book.
even looked inside those. I thought nearly all of those were brand new, that they haven't even been read.
So,
'Cause-
so
Right.
I just thought, wow, this is amazing. Whoever this is, let's
Yeah.
just take it to a whole new level. But anyway, um, so yeah, I had toyed with the idea as well of writing something about El Cid, or El Cid, as they'd say in Spain. So sort of high medieval period. But I don't know that much about the history, so it would be a real jump to write about that period of Spanish history. But maybe one day,
Mm,
give me an excuse to go back to Spain and do some more research trips.
mm. I'm looking
Um,
forward to going back to Hannibal, which I will do in a few years, because the next one will be set in Spain. So I'll get to go and visit,
okay.
yeah. Nice weather, nice food.
I'm just yeah,
People.
absolutely yeah. I'm just seeing about other questions. We've got a question from Justin. I'll skim through and see the others.
If
So,
Ben
if
was
Ben was a
glad
gladiator, which one would he be?
Oh my
So
God,
I pres-
I don't want to be a gladiator.
no, go on then.
A Murmillo.
Which one's that? Is that the
The
with
one
the
with the
trident? Or
no, that's the
no? Which?
Retiaris. The one with the eye holes and the fish-crested helmet.
Okay. And
Um,
what
and
weapon? A
he's got
sword?
more armor, a sword and a shield. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I was going to go for that one, but I'd basically be the one that doesn't get killed. Could I be
Mm.
that one? Can I be like the invincible
The one that doesn't get
gladiator?
injured or killed.
Yeah, can I be the really, really amazingly good gladiator that manages to survive every battle and not get hacked to death? That would be
To be
great.
fair, they reckon about 50% of them made it. I
Well,
know that's fairly poor, but it's
I've never
better
been
than you
very
might.
good. I've never been very good at sports and stuff, so I think I probably wouldn't be a particular. I'd be the guy sitting at the side with writing down the accounts of who died or whatever. I'd be doing. I'd be a scribe. I think I'd die pretty quickly in battle
Mm.
in the gladiatorial arena. Um,
There was a sci-fi book years ago which I read where a guy took a battalion of U.S. Marines back into the Roman times to try and see could they conquer the Roman Empire, like 600 American soldiers.
okay.
Yeah, a bit random.
Right. Have other questions? So, if anyone's got any questions, post them now because we're sort of coming up to an hour mark. So, we can certainly answer a few more questions. But if you've got any and you're thinking, stick them in now, and we'll wait for a few minutes and see if anything else
Uh,
comes up. A chance to go. Where are we at?
which is a favorite book.
I see lots of comments, but not so many questions.
Sam, hi Sam. Sam asked me, do I ever miss veterinary work?
Oh, right. Okay.
Um,
That one.
not what I no, not really. But what I do really like is if my friends and even my readers. I mean, privately, I don't say it on Facebook because it's technically illegal. But if people ask me veterinary advice and I can help, I do love that. Because there are new drugs and there are new treatments, but basically stuff's the same.
Yeah.
And most yeah. So I'm dog sitting at the moment, as I mentioned. So I have about 4 dogs from friends that come and visit me on a sort of regular basis, and it's like I always say, they're people I've known for years, but I always say, and you don't forget, I'm a vet, so in case anything goes wrong. So yeah.
So, well, so so you don't miss the job really, but
No, yeah.
yeah. I can safely say I didn't work in. I wasn't a vet. I worked in IT, and I don't miss it at all. So
Mm.
I have to say, the only thing I miss about my day job that I used to have was the people,
The people. So I miss
interaction
that.
with the
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah, because being a writer is quite a lonely job, and I know
yeah,
a lot of writers actually are quite private people who don't necessarily like going out and about. But as I am a very gregarious person.
yeah, me too. Yeah,
I used to love consulting. So 2 types of vets. Most of them prefer operating and don't like consulting, seeing the patients as much because I have to deal with people. I used to prefer consulting and not prefer operating because I love chatting, as you may have guessed.
yeah. Well, I'm the same. I mean, people would
Mm.
always accuse me of being an extrovert. I don't know why, but but I don't know. Somehow we drift into these jobs as writers. It's like Giles Christian as well, and we show offs that become writers. And then I'm not
Pop
just
star.
accusing Giles of being a show off. I'm just think most of us
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. There's certainly an element of truth to that.
but okay, how did you get into writing? This is the question that you saw before from Jonathan. I don't know if that's to both of us, but you can answer first.
Okay. I had never written a creative word from leaving school until I started my first novel, age 31, and that was born out of. So funny you were talking about veterinary. I decided I didn't want to become a partner in as a vet. So you get they're largely corporate now, but certainly until recently, you'd work your way up the ladder until you bought into a partnership, which is effectively like a marriage but without the sex. And a very costly one. You buy in at anything from £250,000 to £1,000,000, like a second mortgage, and that's your investment, and you pay it off with your increase in salary, and it's your retirement nest egg. And once I realized I was in 2 practices where I realized I didn't want to become a partner. I'd had partnership talks and so on. I just thought, what can I do? Because I'd be bumping around doing the same job then as an assistant for the rest of my career. So I looked into lots of things. I mean, I properly researched how to become a doctor, dentist, lawyer, a counselor, a carpenter, plumber, electrician, and all of them involved a massive drop in wages, or if I was a student, no wages for however many years. I had a mortgage, so they weren't technically that feasible. I mean, I didn't have kids. So I recklessly and naively decided I would write best-selling novels, arrogantly thinking that I'd read books that were bestsellers and go, "That's shite. I could write better than that." It sounds awful, but
We've all done it. I think
we've all
everyone's
done
got
it.
that moment. There's that
Yeah, and
moment.
so I thought if this can be a bestseller, then I can write one that's better. And so, I mean, my first novel, I cringe to look at it now, but I made it. I broke through, and I'm still doing it 17 books later. So it was a deep love of history that sent me into historical fiction. But the spark was this, well, what can I do? I'll try writing. And I mean, I lucked out because my job satisfaction is still over 95%, I would say. What about you?
So I was. So I'd never really written much. As I said, I failed English at school, and I
Mhm.
failed history at school as well.
Have you ever sent
Um,
copies of your books to your English teacher? That would be such a fun thing
no,
to do.
no, I haven't. No. No, but it does make it does. I don't know. I mean, anyway. I mean, I passed English language, so I could write, but I wasn't. I was terrible at reading the books for the literature stuff. If I don't like a book, I find it very difficult to persevere and read it. So getting told to read Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, it's like it was an impossibility. So I went into the exams not having read half the books that I should have read, and then getting asked to write detailed descriptions of them, analysis of them. So I was working in IT, as I said, and but as a technical writer, so I was still writing. So I was writing, but I was writing sort of user manuals and things. And yeah, I saw a documentary about Bamburgh Castle and the bole hole burials that were being excavated just to the south of Bamburgh Castle, and they talked about the history of Bamburgh and how it was the seat of the kings of Bernicia, and how Northumberland or Northumbria was a really important kingdom in the 7th century and 8th century. And I knew nothing of the history, but I'd lived up there as a kid, and I remember, I'd always loved that the landscape and I was really into fantasy role playing. We like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. We mentioned David Gemmell, sort of fantasy swords and sorcery kind of stuff. So I think those two things, kind of the telling the stories through role playing games and swords and things, and the location and the history, it kind of just triggered something. I mean, I started writing The Serpent Sword, and that was back in 2001. Took me years then of research. I didn't realize how difficult it would be to write. Naively, I thought I'd
Exactly.
write.
Yeah.
I thought
Same.
I'd write one book. I thought the book was going to cover the whole life of Bearbrand until I mapped out all these battles and all these things he was going to do. But it was like bullet points. Then he'll go to this battle, then he'll do this battle, then he'll kill. And then I started writing it, and I was like plodding along, and it was like I thought, well, I'm getting close to the end of like a novel length of one book, and I've covered 6 months of this guy's life. What the hell am I going to do? I have to write a series. So yeah, that was it really. And then one thing led to another, and I'd written 3 or 4 books before you know it. You've written half a dozen novels, and you're making enough money to do it full time. And then you go, okay, well maybe there's a career here. And I wanted to be doing. I'd set myself a goal of having a job that I would do for the rest of my life and be happy doing by the time I was 40. And I didn't get there, but I was about 48 or something when I
Oh
ended
wow.
up writing
Yeah.
full time as a writer. And I thought, okay, I'm happy I'll do this until I
Yeah.
retire. This is fine if I ever retire, but
Funnily, I've just remembered. So when I started writing seriously, I was 33, and I set myself the target of giving up veterinary by 40, and I gave it up when I was nearly 39. So yeah, I'd forgotten that. God.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, I started a bit later. I didn't. I didn't actually start writing at it. I didn't start really seriously writing The Serpent Sword. I started writing it before I was 40, but I didn't start writing it seriously until later.
Mm,
So I
mm.
kind of
Oh, look, you made the leap into full-time
yeah.
authorship, and you're
That's
still doing it. It's fantastic. Yeah.
it's the dream. It's the dream.
And
So fingers
yeah,
crossed, it carries on.
absolutely.
So if there's a book series that you'd recommend, which one would it be? From Cornwell to Eagledon, yourselves, anybody?
Oh, easy peasy for me.
I feel we might say the same series, but go on, you go first.
Well, okay, so then I won't say the same thing.
Well, don't
Okay,
know. You say
okay.
first.
Well, there's 2, but I'll name the one. So she only wrote 7 historical novels.
No, so it's a she, so we're not talking about the
Yeah, I
same
know who
series
you're
as
going to
reader.
say, which
Yeah.
is why I changed. But so, and it is the best historical fiction. I say this, that I will ever read in my life, and I might live till I'm 100. It will not be bettered. The Alexander trilogy by Mary Renault, a gay lady in the 1950s from England who recaptured 5th century, 3rd century, 4th century Greece like no one has ever done until maybe the person you're going to mention. And quite quite extraordinary books. And I have a friend, you know, Katie Elizabeth on Facebook, Wet,
Yeah.
Dark and Wild on Twitter.
Hmm.
She has never read the 3rd Alexander novel. She's read the first 2 like 10 times because she can't bring herself to.
I've never read
And
any of them. So
okay, no, well, I only read them about 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years
so
ago,
now
and I now have read 6 of her 7 historical novels, and I've kept one back because of what Katie said to me, because I know that I'll never read it again for the first time. Her book, they are, I mean, you know, forget my books. They're just on a different level. They're extraordinary.
I mean, that's the thing. When you read something, I find when I read certain books, there's lots of books I read and I think, yeah, I could maybe do that. It's good, whatever. There's bits you think, maybe that's better than I could do, or that's worse than I would do. You kind of have this
Mm,
running commentary in my head when I'm reading almost.
mm.
But then sometimes you pick up a book and you read it and you think, I could never do that. That's so
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I
That's
mean, I
just
want.
so good.
Yeah. It's just a different level. I just almost want to weep because it just I could never do it. It is just so incredible. But that's okay because
So
yeah, you know, you write well, I write well. We just don't write like that. It's okay.
yeah. I mean, it's yeah. Everybody writes differently, and everybody's
Yeah,
got different things. And
you know, there are
but
Van Goghs and there are people who can paint cats and dogs and sell them in the village marketplace. That's a really
yeah.
bad analogy, but you know what I mean.
Thanks. So I was thinking, well, because you mentioned Cornwell, it kind of drew my mind to the Bernard Cornwell, the Winter King series, the Arthurian
Oh yeah,
series, which was the trilogy that got me, I think, really interested in writing. So I read that just before I really started the Serpent Sword, and I think that was one that really captured my imagination. I think it's Cornwell's best writing, that trilogy, the Winter King, Enemy of God, and
yeah,
Excalibur, the
yeah.
trilogy. I think if you haven't read those, anybody watching, then and you've read any Bernard Cornwell, I would recommend trying them and seeing what you think, because there's so much you can see in Uhtred has come from the
Yes.
formation in those books, and I think they're better because they're finished in 3 books, and it sort of encapsulates the whole story and more emotional. There's more emotional oomph in them, for want of a
I
better
must
word.
go back and read them because I read them when they came out, but I was in my
Yeah.
middle 20s, and it's very different reading a book when you're our age compared to then,
Yes.
isn't it?
Well,
So,
exactly. I mean, you're a different you're a different reader when you read at a different time of your life. But I
yeah.
think I was going to say something else. Oh, more recent book, and this is just sort of come left field as you were talking. Um, Toby Clement's 4 books,
God, the King. Oh,
the
Winter
Winter
Pilgrims.
Pilgrims, the best books, best modern books best books I've read that have been written in the last,
They
I
are
don't know, 10 years or whatever.
extraordinary, aren't they?
Extraordinary, yeah. And in
And he
fact,
won't write anymore. You know, he would. They wanted him to keep going with the series, and he wouldn't because he
so
didn't
what's he
want
doing
to.
now? Because I've not seen any other books of
He's
his.
ghostwriting.
Okay.
He's ghostwriting. Oh God, what he told me. I was emailing him recently. You know, he's making a living, but he's ghostwriting Shakespeare, an Elizabethan detective series,
Okay.
something like that.
Well, they're amazing. So I think
Yeah,
partly
they are.
it's good, maybe it was the right decision to end with 4, but 4 set in the Wars of the Roses, amazing. The first one is called The Winter Pilgrims, I
Winter
think.
Pilgrims, yeah.
Really great series. So if you haven't read those, and they kind of were huge for a couple of years, and then because his name is kind of dropped out of,
Mm.
off of the radar a bit because he's not writing, I guess, under his name. So,
So
things sort of came
here's
to
a
an end.
question, which brings us right back to the beginning. You mentioned writing in the first person in your most recent book. So
Mm.
I was sent Winter Pilgrims by my editor because she was Toby's editor, and it's in publishing. Everyone, you probably guessed, it's a bit. If you're in the same publishing house, you'll get sent a book with a kind of a "Would you
Yeah.
give the jacket?" quote. And I
Yeah.
opened it, and it was written in the present tense in first person. And I remember saying, "Oh fuck." because I've done it now myself. I changed my mind. At the time, I didn't like books in first person, and I didn't like them in the present tense. And I started out of a sense of duty to my editor. And it, like you say, that it is some of the best historical fiction of the last 10 or 20 years.
Well, I was exactly the same. I thought present tense. Oh God, I can't be doing this. This is weird, you know. And the first person thing wasn't so bad, but the present tense, I can't remember. I just remember thinking that, but it's done as a two header, so it alternates the male character and the female character throughout the books. And in fact, Wolf of Wessex, it was my nod to David Gemmell, but the structure was my nod to Toby Clements, because I did it two characters, the old man and the young girl, and it's them alternating throughout the whole book. And there was one bit my editor said, "Oh, you need to add a chapter here." And I said, "I can't just add one chapter. I'm going to have to add two chapters."
Yeah.
Because I'm alternating. I can't mess it up in the middle. So I had to, seamlessly create two new chapters to slide in there, which is
keep the symmetry.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't break the thing there, but yeah,
that's nice. Have you ever told him? Have you ever met him at any of the HWA?
No,
oh, he's a lovely guy. He's super nice.
I absolutely. I'm always singing his praises in those books, and you just reminded me that I used that structure because of his books, because it's so good. So yeah, I'd love to meet him one day. So maybe you never know. Maybe I can get him on
HWA events, get back up and running.
I can get him on one of these.
He's good. Yeah.
So, question for you there, Ben. Do you plan on revisiting?
So for those of you who don't know, it's only two books, a duology, I think it's called, and it's about the Roman invasion of Macedon and Greece in 200 BC to 197, and the logical moving on from that was the Romans taking on the Seleucid Empire in Asia Minor, which is Turkey, just a few short years later, and defeating the Seleucids at the Battle of Magnesia, as in Milk of Magnesia. And it was never my plan to do that. It was only ever going to be a two-book series, but I certainly have high hopes of potentially writing that one day. I don't know that I'd carry it right forward down to the rebellion, the last hurrah of the Macedonians in 161, the Battle of Pydna. But I would like to do the clash with the Seleucids, maybe as a standalone, with the character Felix, who's in that. So hopefully one day, but there are only so many books in us, Matthew, aren't there?
And increasingly fewer as we age, and the brains are more wrung out, and we get closer to the time that we can't think of anything else, I guess. There's a couple more. I'm just going to take a couple more questions before we wrap up. There's quite a lot of comments which are just sort of general praise for Bernard Cornwell and stuff like that, and people bemoaning the fact that I was a terrible student. I'm sorry.
Would we ever write a combined book? Did you see that?
Yes, that's the one. I've just seen that one. So, I mean, it's something that every now and again, not specifically thinking about writing with Ben, but just every now and again, I sort of think, I see books that are written by two people, and I think, oh, that's an interesting idea. And I suppose if you were doing a two-header one, like I was saying, or we've talked about, and I know that Gordon Doherty and Simon Turney did it, and they've had two characters, and they do, alternating chapters, and each one takes one character and writes those chapters. And they just make sure the whole book sort of hangs together. So I think if I could find a suitable subject and got on well enough with the other writer, because you have to spend a lot of time talking to them. And I'm not saying that I don't get on well enough with Ben, but I'm just thinking that that would be a huge undertaking. You need to really make sure that you had a rock solid relationship first, because I think otherwise it would get quite tense.
Yeah, potentially. I've done one as well, which was easier. So I did A Day of Fire, which was the eruption of Vesuvius. I did that with 6 other authors. Americans mostly, and we basically just split up the eruption from the day before to the day after, and how many hours you had in that. And because it was funny, I was the one who was just finished a book, so I had the time. I got to choose, so I got the eruption, which was awesome. And we just had to make sure that our characters bumped into or mentioned the others. We didn't have to work together much apart from that.
Yeah,
and 7 years down the line, it's just been picked up by a mainstream publisher.
Okay.
So we've all been trickling along, getting like £300-400 worth of royalties a year each. But it's just been bought. It's going to be out in hardback, paperback, audio book, and ebook. So it's kind of a win-win situation.
Yeah,
Mm.
no, that sounds great. Actually, I
Maybe
remember
let's come up now when we meet in the pub. We should come up with an idea.
we'll have to come up with an idea that would work.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just about the structure and working out what would
Mm.
what would work and what characters to tackle.
Yeah,
I
that
like
could
that
be
idea.
fun.
I remember at the time, seeing that coming out and thinking, people saying it was really good. I haven't read it, but I remember people sort of talking about how well it hung, hung
Which A
together, and
Day of
people,
Fire.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
All right. Oh
and
no,
that
nice. Yeah, I
people
didn't know.
saying
I mean,
it was very
I've not heard
moving.
much about it, but yeah, it was
Yeah.
great fun to write. I had a guy who was waking up with a hangover on the morning of it, thinking the rumbling, the shaking of the ground was his
Yeah, I
head.
think what's that? What's
Yeah.
that? Oh, it's the end of the world, mate. So
There was one
thank
there for
you.
you. Is there an
Oh,
end in sight for Bearbrand's story?
oh yeah, I see that here. It's yeah. That sounds like you want me to finish. You probably get it over with, finish it now. Well, yes, sort of ish. I don't know. The as I said, I don't plan that far ahead. So I had kind of at one point in my plan, I had an idea for Bearbrand that he'd end up in a certain time and place as an old man. I had this kind of thing, but I kind of feel that I've started doing some of that with Hunlaf as the old monk looking back on his life, and it's obviously a different character, different story. So I feel like maybe that some of the place I was going to take it, I'm kind of going with some other characters already, so maybe it's not going to go there. But yeah, the short answer, I guess, is yes. I've written the 9th novel, will be out in December. It's called Forest of Foes, and there's only so many alliterative titles I can think of, so that's
I've
when I've got
been
to end
meaning
the
to
series.
ask you when you're going to run out of titles.
They're titles that actually have to link to the story as well. That's the problem. I can think of alliterative titles till the cows come home, but not that actually make any sense. And so, yeah. So, and I've done I've made it even more complicated. Is I've got parts in the book, so they're split into like 3 parts or something, and I give those titles as well. And sometimes those are alliterative, and
Oh my
they
God.
don't have to be alliterative, those ones, but sometimes they are
That
because it
sounds
just
like a
happens.
rod for your own back because there's a sort of law of diminishing returns.
The title thing was definitely rough my own back, and it's because it's really about hearkening to old English poetry and the fact they use alliteration a lot in the poetry.
Okay.
And so I wanted the titles to kind of reflect that old English
Mm.
Anglo-Saxon vibe. And with the
Mm-hmm.
first couple of books, it was great. The Serpent's Sword, the Cross and the Curse, Blood and Blade. Oh, it's brilliant. But then you get down to Forest of Foes. Where am I going now? Fortress of Fury. I've got all of these things. It's like, oh my god. So anyway, I'll be thinking of some more.
Welcome to the world of a Roman author where you've got to use the word legion,
Or
eagle,
Rome.
or Rome,
Yeah.
and variations
Exactly.
upon a theme, or
So,
blood.
or blood. So I
Yeah.
think I think it probably is going to be, I don't know the exact number, but I reckon about a dozen. I think that I've probably got another 3 that I need to write to finish up that story. And there's gaps in his story, so I could always go back and write prequels or middle sections if I wanted to. And there's characters that could become spin-off characters potentially, but I do feel that at some point the story has to come to an end because I know you can carry on churning out novels of a character for 30 novels or whatever, but I feel that there comes a point that even as the writer, you start getting a bit tired of it and thinking, maybe.
100%.
So
Yeah.
I'm not tired of Bearbrand exactly. It's not. I just think there comes a point you can sort of see the end coming, and so yeah, he's getting on a bit now. He's around 40. He's a granddad by book 9. So
Hang up his axe and sit by
he's
the fire.
he's got a yeah. I've got an end in sight for him, but I think there's going to have to be some leaps of years to get him there in sort of 3 books. The way I write those series. So yeah, we'll see. Could be more than 12 in the end. We'll find out.
I don't know whether this would apply to you. Just sorry, quickly before the
Yeah.
next question. But one of the things I found great fun with my novellas that I write is it allows me to go back to a character to a different time of their life where I know I'll probably never write a full novel because I don't have the time, but I can write a novella. And so it's like it's like a window into another part of the character's life that we might never get otherwise.
Yeah, it's something that I haven't done, but yeah, it would be good to do actually because there are some big gaps in the storyline. So sometimes I think there's the biggest gap. There's a 6-year gap in Bearbrand's life, and nothing really is. We just mentioned the fact there was some battles there that he was in, and so anything, lots of things could have happened in that 6 years.
Mm.
There's huge amounts of life that you could talk about. So somebody here, following on for the Bear Brand thing, is can you please give Bear Brand a happy storyline? Wow. All I'll say is I finished book 9, so maybe book 10. Yeah.
Justin wants to know, would you ever tackle Romans?
Yeah, would you ever tackle Romans? I never say never, but I think it's unlikely because there's so many Roman authors, so many Jaffras or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many Roman authors that know an awful lot more about Rome than I do, and I really don't know anything about Rome. So I don't, all I know about Rome is stuff I've read in novels. Sorry, Ben.
So many other time periods, I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm enjoying not writing Rome for a while is, it does get a bit, would you, for example, you're writing your novel or theoretically set in 19th century America.
Yeah.
Would you want to only ever write Dark Age novels for the rest of your career? Probably not.
No, and that's why I'm looking at writing other. I think that the next period, if I don't write, or if I do write 19th century, I think the next period that I'd probably gravitate towards would be sort of the high medieval period, like you with the Lionheart, that sort of period. There's so much history. There's so many things going on. There's so much, with the Crusades and everything else. I mean, there's, every country in Europe, has got, and in Asia and all over the place has got so many things going on that I think that would probably be the next main time period that I would aim for. I don't know where, I don't know what thing, but some more questions popping up here. What do we got? So it's a nice one here from Christopher. Don't have a question, just don't stop writing either. So that's nice. Well,
don't worry, Christopher. Keep
have any
writing them. We'll keep writing them.
Exactly. But that was I think it was, I can't remember which book it was now. One of my more recent books, that was my, the dedication was to the readers and say, you keep buying and I'll keep writing. Thanks very much.
Yeah. I dedicated a book to my readers a while back and just said, you keep me in a job. So please, you keep doing it. Thank you. And I'll keep writing.
So yeah, it's absolutely. Oh, so Jason actually followed up saying that he actually dreaded the he's dreading the end of the Bear Brand series. So okay, so you don't have to worry too much. There's still a few more books there, but they'll be interspersed with Hunlaf and maybe other books as well. But I reckon out of every sort of 2 or 3 books I write, there'll be one Bear Brand and then something else. I'm not just going to write the Bear Brand books non-stop because I think I might go crazy. Yeah. So I think I'll make this the last question. And if anyone's got another one to throw in, do it quick. But we're wrapping up now. So would either of you tackle the Anarchy?
When is the Anarchy? It doesn't ring a bell, I have to say.
The Anarchy is King Stephen and
Matilda. Yeah. Sorry, the 1030s, 1040s, 1050s. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, the period of massive instability in England before the invasion of.
Oh no, I think no. Is it then?
Sorry, Henry II. Before Henry II, it's Richard. It's Richard. Richard Lionheart's father, Henry II.
1135 to 1153.
1135 to 1150, not 1035 December. Sorry.
Yeah.
I read about it a bit when I was researching Henry II for the Lionheart books. So Elizabeth Chadwick's has covered that. Some of her standalones. Probably not is the simple answer. There are things that light my fire more than that. It's not that it isn't interesting. I mean, there was a fantastic true story I remember reading in the Elizabeth Chadwick novel about it, and I went and looked it up, where a guy had been fleeing from he was on one side or the other during that war, and he was fleeing and hid up in the steeple of a church, and they set the church on fire, and some of the lead ran down into one of his eyeballs and burnt his eyeball out of his head, but he survived.
Nice.
That'd be a great thing to put in a book.
Wow.
Yeah, so but probably not.
The only I can't imagine tackling. I don't know really anything about that period either, and so it would be a leap to go there. But I mean, any time of great conflict obviously is a time for great stories. So if you can, find a good story there, definitely. Marie E says that she's writing a book set in that period anyway. So good luck to you, Marie. But I have got one moment that's lifted from the Anarchy, actually, in Blood and Blade, when a female character at the end of the story escapes in a snowstorm in my book. She's actually in Dunedin, or Dunedin, I don't know how you pronounce it, in Edinburgh, basically, and she escapes in a snowstorm, and that's actually lifted from Matilda escaping, I think it's from Oxford, in a snowstorm, dressed in white, and she walked through, apparently climbed out the castle, walked through the guards and people that were sort of besieging the castle, but she was dressed in white and it was all snowing. They just didn't see her. So I used that and thought that was a good escape that anybody could do. So I just incorporated that and mentioned it in the historical note that it was a real historical moment. It just was a different time, a different place.
So I'm guessing you were confident when you used that you'd never write that period, because I've done that sometimes, lifted a real thing from a different time thinking I can never write a book about that period then because I've used it in a different time period.
Well, I'd never, to be honest, that was book 3. At that point, I didn't think I was ever going to write more than 3 books. I didn't think I was going to write more than 1 book. So, now who knows?
So one of the reasons I mentioned I'd never go as far as the Battle of Pydna, which is where the Romans defeated the son of the king of Macedon, who they defeated 30 years before in the books I wrote about, there was a fantastic scene. So the Romans used to sacrifice animals before battle to see were the auspices good? Did the intestines look healthy? I mean, it's nuts. But you couldn't fight if the auspices were wrong. Anyway, clearly not every Roman general believed that, because all we have is one line, which I wrote into a whole scene, but 21 bulls were sacrificed before the day of the Battle of Pydna.
To get the right one.
And they absolutely battered the Macedonians off the field. So the general knew he was going to win, and he just thought, you old liar, you old shark. Get another one. Another scene where all the soldiers go, oh, and he goes, get another one, and eventually the soothsayer. So I can't
gods have changed their minds.
Yeah, the gods have changed their minds. I can't write a book with Pydna in it because I'd have to use that scene again.
Yeah. So okay, well, on that note of animal sacrifice, brings us full circle to your first job as a vet.
That's nice.
So thanks everybody for coming, and thanks especially, of course, to Ben for your time and for sharing your knowledge and just chatting generally about writing and this crazy thing that is writing historical fiction. And thanks everybody, and see you soon. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Honestly, it was a great pleasure. It was really good fun. Thanks, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.